Hey everyone, this is Tom, and this week's character is Durul, the dwarven druid for Kyle. This was for my another one of my favorite theme weeks, Dwarf Week, and it was a fun challenge, fun but also scary. Durul so far has been he had been for a long time in the process a very difficult character to paint. I don't know. I was just in a rut. It was hard to get it going. So I just powered through. Like I've said on a bunch of videos, and I have felt on almost every one of these, probably all of them. But for a long time, there's a looming sense of wanting to just start over. But then it's just a matter of powering through and just keeping on going. And in the case of Durul, it worked out. I'm actually quite happy with him, especially his face. But we'll get into that later. But yeah, this one was, I don't know if I was rusty or if I'm in a bit of feeling like I'm in a bit of a rut, but it was scary for a long time, and I sort of hem and haw as I go for quite a lot of it, especially once I start painting it up. But as always, as I'm constantly needing to learn and relearn again, is just stick with it, keep working through it. It's like a a really frustrating aspect about drawing that happens a lot in making images or coming up with an idea, is that when you feel like you don't get what you wanted right away, that you're not good at what you're doing, and that can be extremely discouraging, extremely intimidating, and limiting. And there's certainly a factor with everything about not being ready for it, or even not being good at it, just outright. But with something like this, and I'd imagine with anything that, well, I guess like most things, that stuff that you just get better at over time with is just not giving up. And whether it's piece by piece and day by day even, but in this case I'm talking more about just like an individual piece, but just like if I'm working on this head, I can just draw a blob. I'm not gonna just snipe the perfect head shape right off the bat. I'm gonna need to just plop down something and then refine it until it's the right shape. And if it means I have to draw new lines or erase old ones, then so be it. It's just going to be how it's going to go. Like, you're not just going to plop down the best idea, the best shape, the best line. Very rarely that happens. I've had like about 2 or 3 perfect lines that I've drawn in my life, and most of those were letters and numbers that just looked like amazing fonts. I did a perfect Z once. I was really impressed. Yeah, it's, you put something down and then you refine it, and you keep working on it, and you don't give up. You just keep changing it until it sort of suits what you're going for. But as far as the character, this anatomy of Durul, it's sort of hard to say. I guess it shouldn't be Durul. Okay, anyway, is a dwarf. He's an older dwarf though. He's 272, which by Kyle's reckoning is sort of like a late 60s human. I'll go over his story in a little while. I like him a lot, but with dwarves and things, I don't like having like Hulk dwarves or like cartoonishly muscular dwarves. I'm more inspired by like the Norse Eddas and sagas and stuff, and like their dwarves. And I mean, I think for the most part, at least in illustrations from the 19th century, they're usually like I can't remember if it's achondroplasic dwarves, like sort of like when you imagine dwarfism dwarves. But there's a lot of like older illustrations and like mythical stuff, a lot of like Arthur Rackham drawings, sort of like that kind of, if not him, it's like that sort of era. But there's always, like, to me, there's this picture that I keep remember seeing, or like a few of them, where it's like this barrel-chested old dwarf, and their arms are thin, but they look like a worker or a toiler. Their arms aren't bodybuilder arms, but they're strong arms. They're built from just working. And this guy is that way. He is a tradesman. But I wanted something that was still dwarven, so basically but still had like something biological, something that fit the character. So just hit the mic. Okay, I'm getting distracted by a cat hair on. Okay, there we go. But basically, in order, like when you think of dwarves, you think of like strong forms, and they're always drawn as big buff body types. So in order to compensate for that, if you're going to be drawing things like skinny arms and legs, which is common for older people as long as they're not overweight, it's remembering the skeleton underneath. So when a human, even in real life, like they get stronger, their muscles get bigger, their bones get bigger under their muscles as well, a little bit. Not like a layperson wouldn't really be able to tell the difference between a bodybuilder skeleton and a regular, like, average human skeleton, but I'm pretty sure an anthropologist or some sort of doctor would be able to tell after some observation. But there is something to it. But having even just this humanoid structure that's a bit different, so it's basically just a long way of saying like broader shoulders. So the nub, like the ball at the top of the humerus that represents like that outer part of the shoulder and the upper deltoid, like that's spread out a little bit further. It can get kind of messy with like clavicles and stuff, and having too big of a space between the ribs and the socket of the humerus, the upper arm bone. So you got to watch out for that. You got to make sure that you're filling that space. I guess it's sort of hard to explain, but yeah, but I mean that's sort of the good thing. So as you're compensating, like you spread the arms out, the shoulders, and then the rib cage goes out, and now you've got the big square rectangular dwarf body. If you want it to be like something that could, if they got more fit, it would have like a V to it. You could easily sort of narrow the pelvis and all that, but yeah, it's I think in a lot of cases fantasy creatures tend to be thrown into default body types too easily. But it's also the case that most people like characters and play as characters that are usually in their 20s or 30s, sometimes younger, sometimes older. But it's really rare that anybody ever see a character that looks like they're in their 60s, especially as like a player character. So even if you're like looking at like concept art for stuff, you're never really seeing too much old people stuff. So it's kind of cool to play with body types in that way. Even like with his pectoral muscles, like there's still, I mean, if you want to go back and look at it, there's still the structure and the form there, but there's a little bit of hang. It's sort of coming out a bit near the bottom where there's got some fat collected behind the nipples, and it's hanging down. And it's not like he's not going to be like modeling, but he wouldn't be like ashamed to have his shirt off. He could walk around, but he's just got one of those like hardworking old man bodies. So this is where I started getting into my rut. I think is you might notice it when watching here, but as I go, I mean I make progress here and there. It's sort of hard to track, but there's a lot of hemming and hawing. There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of figuring out. There's a lot of like having a hard time locking down the color, and this sort of stuff happens. Even just like if I kind of forget how I like to do things, which can happen, usually about halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, or right after I've signed it, I kind of remember how I like to do it and how I should have gone about it. But it's that's like the one benefit to having a short-term memory is actually that's not a joke. I actually forgot the point that I was gonna make. Oh boy. But I think maybe it's no, I don't. I think I was gonna say it's the good thing about having short-term memory is that you get to. Okay, I'm gonna change it. I'm just gonna say that I'm gonna come up with a new one that I think is also true. But is that you kind of get to by rediscovering it, you sort of forget. You sort of forget everything, but you'll remember a little by little here and there of the stuff that actually works or the stuff that really needs to be picked up again. So you kind of lose a lot of you lose a lot of the fluff. But I mean, this is also me. I'm not this is not like an artist's trick. This is not like a secret technique or anything that's going to help you. I'm just sort of, I'm looking at the bright side of thinking two conversations at once and forgetting stuff. But yeah, anyway, so moving on, like, I'm starting to get the face. This is where it's happened before, but where I'm sort of trying to go about it meticulously, adding the colors, doing this, but then it just feels so stiff and sterile. So I just make a new layer and just start painting over stuff and just say, enough of this. I'm just gonna go for it. And usually once I hit that point, I start feeling a lot more relaxed. I start feeling a lot more free to just try something, or try many things, and it's something that works out quite a bit for me. Just like get the colors in, blend some stuff up, throw it in there, and see how it goes. Actually, one thing I also did on this one is I didn't add the frame until later. I always do the silhouette frame to kind of make it so I don't have to keep retightening the lineup. I thought I would try not doing that and doing it later. And I realized, I don't think too much further into the future from now, I don't remember at what point I added it, but I realized that it was a mistake, and that I've been right to be doing it for myself this whole time, and that it really helps a lot for me to not have to worry about the silhouette, to not have to worry about keeping the borders clean, because otherwise it's too many things. I already do enough jumping around and touching up this, touching up that, and just like going like a butterfly from thing to thing, that I don't need to have a border around a character that's constantly changing and undulating and receding and like a tide. So that might have been one of the things that I was throwing off. I was maybe in my brain I was spinning too many plates at once. But anyway, when I was reading the description, I started picturing. Actually, I'll go over the description while I'm sort of putzing around and still trying to figure out what I'm going to do with this character. So I'll go through the description that Kyle sent me. Okay, so Durul is a male gold dwarf from the Giants Run Mountains in the southern area of the Sword Coast. He is 272 years old, roughly equivalent to a human in their late 60s. So he's definitely an old dwarf. He came to adventuring late in life, having spent his first 250 years seldom straying far from home. He joined the family business, became a stonemason, married, and had children. When his wife died and with his children grown for the first time in his life, he was able to satiate a wanderlust that he had felt ever since he was a boy. Through his children and other family members, or though his children and other family members objected, he packed a bag and said goodbye to the only life he knew, beginning a journey with no destination in mind. He spent the next 20 years wandering and found that he had a great love for nature, which only grew over time. Forests especially felt more home to him than the mountains ever did. While exploring the many forests of the Sword Coast, he met rangers and druids who shared his passion for nature. Among them were worshippers of Eldath, goddess of peace. These encounters shaped the adventurer that Durul became, a druid of the Circle of the Moon and a follower of Eldath. He always does his best to observe the pacifism she teaches, though his time adventuring has proved to him that sometimes force is the only way. Eventually he settled in the Silver Marches region of the northern Sword Coast. Although settled is a relative term for a dwarf, he spent most of his time wandering the hills, forests, and mountains, but he would stop in at towns and cities now and again to partake of good ale, make friends, and send letters back to his children. He eventually became entangled with 3 gnomes who demonstrated that they would get into far too much trouble without him around. They do not share his peaceful ideas. He's winning them over, though. But he would lay down his life in a second to keep them safe. For a while, this was his driving motivation, but then they made a terrible mistake and unleashed a devil bound to a mechanical construct into the world. Durul always wants to see the best in people, and the devil had little trouble deceiving him and his companions into freeing him. Innocents died because of their grave error. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm so yawny, and now stopping the devil is what drives him forward. this doesn't keep him from nosing in whenever he sees an injustice to be corrected. He is very much lawful good and always encourages everyone else to live up to his standard of right and wrong. Those who don't are the only ones to see Durul's less pleasant side. Generally speaking, Durul is a dwarf of good cheer and optimism. He wants to make friends with every new stranger he encounters, and he is always willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. He is well known for giving away most of his coin to his party, and what he keeps he spends on ale, which is consumed and shared in the forging of new and or stronger friendships. That's exactly what ale is for. His party member Haplo, the gnome enchanter, describes Durul as a peaceful grandpa dwarf. That probably gets more to the heart of this character than anything I've written. I got some stats and got this description here. Okay, well, if you guys want his stats, I might as well read them out. 12 strength, 12 dexterity, 14 constitution, 10 intelligence, 18 wisdom, and 12 charisma. He has green eyes, blonde hair, and a bushy beard that doesn't see as much maintenance as it probably should, though he doesn't let it get too long. Since leaving his home in the mountains, his skin has taken on the tan of someone who spends most of their time outdoors, and as a dwarf of his age, wrinkles abound. He wears simple, durable traveling clothes and hide armor. He keeps a solid wooden shield around for emergencies, though he shapeshifts for most of his combat scenarios. He carries with him a walking stick and a stone-bladed hand axe that's mostly used for chopping firewood. He has recently been given a dagon blessed by Myliki, another nature deity. It allows him to speak with animals once per day. He has a bear claw totem, which is his druidic focus, as bears are his favored form of shapeshifting. He travels very light in terms of additional adventuring equipment, which he keeps in a worn leather backpack. He does carry rations, but uses the good berry spell to keep him and his companions fed, so he usually has a few of those tucked into pockets and pouches. He also has a magic necklace set with an emerald, which allows him to communicate telepathically with the other members of his party when they are nearby. Yeah, so that's the description of Durul. Actually, one thing I just wanted to say is that I really liked a lot about this character was his name. It's a very solid name. I don't think I've actually complimented any of the winners yet on their characters' names, but Durul is awesome. It's very solid. It's very Tolkienian, which makes sense. Not that I'm saying he's a plagiarist or anything, but it's got that perfect dwarven feel. It doesn't have any double letters or apostrophes or K's where there should be C's. I think like calling a name Tolkienian in my book is one of the highest compliments you can give a name for a fantasy character, because Tolkien's naming conventions and the names he chose were by far the best in any fantasy series ever done. I can go into a rant about why I think that, but I just had to say it because I just love this character's name, and it's fun to say, and it's very dwarven, and I just thought I'd have to say that. So after going through that character stuff, when I was reading it, I sort of, with all the descriptions, like he's late 60s. Works with his hands. The fact that he was a like a tradesman, a stonemason, and then started going on adventures later on. It sort of reminded me of like hiking, and then like some sort of like northern European mountain ranges, suntan stuff. There's so many, and like even like friendly grandpa. There's all these different factors that sort of had blocked this face in my mind, and I don't know if it's like a particular face that I've seen, but just like this like a well-tanned old Scandinavian dwarf face, which just like beat up features, like the eyes that, they're the eyebrows that go up in the middle and sort of down, like a heavier brow on the sides, and they just add like this. I just wanted this like super. Maybe it's Dutch, some sort of Germanic Scandinavian thing. But I think dwarves naturally have that kind of blend, or that sort of like cultural sort of origin, at least as far as fantasy goes. And I just pictured this friendly old man dwarf face that I just tried to match. I didn't find anybody that looked exactly like him, but I just went and tried to sort of make what I was going on in my mind. I wanted him, like the really tan skin, light eyes, and like blonde hair. I pictured him balding, something thin, like thinning, not necessarily not like male pattern baldness. I know in Middle Earth, dwarves don't go bald, but I'm not actually sure in Forgotten Realms. They might go bald in Forgotten Realms, but something thin and wispy, just sort of showing age. But I guess I don't know. When I was painting it sort of reminded me of a gym teacher I once had who just looked like a Viking. He was short, but he looked like he had like just stereotypical Viking face. And so I don't know. I was happy that he ended up looking like that because it was actually quite similar to what I was going for. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun to go, and even just like having a like facial hair that's different colors than the hair. I used to have this one teacher who had a really orange beard and really white blonde hair. He wasn't even that old, but it was a distinct contrast. And even I've got my beard is a different color than my hair, and I think it's like a really natural look. I don't see that very often in fantasy, where if you see a dwarf, they've got red hair, they've got brown hair, they've got black hair, they've got white hair, and everything is all one color. And that's a lot of the time for most characters, other than like the odd case where they have brown hair or black hair, and then they have like gray, like salt and pepper sort of color. But I can't think of it's out there. I'm not saying nobody's done it, but I can't think of an example of where you've drawn or someone's drawn like a character with a red beard and blonde hair or brown hair or something different, some sort of weird mix and match thing. Although I have had people ask me if I dye my hair, because there's like a line between my head hair and my beard hair, and it looks like I'm like ashamed to have red hair, which I wouldn't be anyway. But I just say no. That's just how I was born. But I could see it being a thing where it's like I could see certain art directors or marketing people in a boardroom making a complaint that people are going to be confused by this, and then the artist saying, yeah, you're probably right, and then changing it so that it's all just one color. But I wanted to say that's enough, so let's do it. And I think it works. It kind of, even like in my family, like people they're older and some hair has gone white, some hair hasn't, and it's sort of a neat thing. But I think it's like a thing of age too, where I mean he's got the sun affecting the color of his hair, and his beard hasn't changed yet, but it's going, and I don't know, that maybe that's just enough about his beard. So going on to the costume. So he's got hide armor. I wanted it to be not too, because he's a druid. Druid requires, in my mind, it requires a level of savagery to it. It's like wild and tribal and like really foresty. So there has to be like if I'm ever doing like a wizard or like a mage, I feel like there has to be some bit of flowy material in there somewhere, and like some sort of jacket, some sort of version of a jacket has to be there with to sort of emulate that robe or like that billowy fabric look. And to me, when it comes to druids, there's always got to be that raggedy edge. There's got to be like that unkempt texture to parts in the silhouette, and it usually, even getting specific, it usually something bunches up around the shoulders and head. There's something, yeah. So yeah, something raw, something that's not typical leather. If you think of leather, people usually go straight to like a brown belt, like leather brown like that. But I was thinking like deer hide, not only because it's just less common, but it's also, it's more of a more naturally colored leather. Most leather that winds up being brown is, it's it's stained quite brown. It's not a natural. It doesn't naturally get that brown. But deer hide can get yellowed quite easily out in the woods, like with different ways of prepping the skin. So I picture it being something that he's done himself out in the wild. So it's deer hide. He's out in the woods. Deer live in the woods more than cows would. So it seemed fitting to me. And I didn't want it to be too ornate. Like it's not really like combat armor. It's more protection armor. And the difference that like he's not out looking for fights, but he's got enough to block a glancing blow. Maybe absorb an arrow shot, although probably not really. Arrows go through a lot pretty easily. Actually, no, an arrow would just go right through it anyway. But it's not like he's not looking for a fight. He's just looking to sort of cover his bases a little bit. So there's no studs, there's no buckles, there's no, like, it's not like a big sort of to-do. I was inspired a little bit. It seems like I've tried to use this so many times in the past, but there's like pictures online of Inuit armor. It's for like when they would war together or against each other. They I guess, but it's like it was like sort of armor that went up along the shoulders and back like a little wall, sort of like if you have like if you go to the science fair and there's those big white three-sided sort of boards, or it's a long rectangular board that's folded twice on the ends, and you put up your pictures and paragraphs and stuff. It's sort of like that with more facets to it, but it's sort of wrapped around. And in that case, because of the materials, it was much more rigid and vertical and straight. But it was like a power shawl. Hard to explain, but that my inspiration definitely came from there, as far as that goes. But yeah, block arrows, block wind. It's not too bad for you. Actually, one thing I was shocked in this case was there's something kind of happened when I actually removed hair from his eyebrows. I love giving characters gnarly eyebrows, especially dwarves, but something about it just gave it such a more human quality, and not like human as in like the race human as opposed to dwarves, but like personality came through. Maybe it's because it reminded me all the more of that teacher that I knew. Not that it was a portrait or anything, but it just sort of had that feel. It's sort of like a face that I've seen, or eyes that I've seen. Maybe it was just they were too gimmicky, going out too long, but or if it, yeah, I don't know what it was, but once I did it, I just stopped immediately. As far as like beard length and unkemptness, dwarves usually take pride in their beard; they grow out. But another thing here I wanted to is like rather than having like a big sort of hobo beard that just shot out in one outer big direction, it's sort of like it happens to a lot of beards. It happens to mine sometimes where it's like it kind of crimps around the chin a bit. There's like a curl to it that sort of defines little hints in the face here and there, but it's sort of like curls back down under the chin, and it just seemed like a bit more naturalistic of a beard. I didn't want to do short length aside, I didn't want to do the typical dwarven beard where it's like the big thick chunks of hair and braids and things. I just wanted something very natural, very, I guess, organic, I suppose. As far as this axe handle here, for a long time it was just super basic. I picture him having like his axe on the back there ready to go. But it needed, I think it needed age, it needed signs of use, and it needed signs of significance and care, and the fact that it's of dwarven make. So I think it would read as being carved ergonomically. Maybe it's because it's just so blunt or just so prominently carved in, but my thoughts were that like he's just been using this thing for so many decades and with such a strong grip that his hand is slowly worn in these indentations around for where his hand would go. I was inspired by, or at least it was sort of based on like something I remember that I saw a long time ago, where it was the floor in some Buddhist temple somewhere, where a monk would get up every morning, maybe multiple times a day, I'm not sure, and he would stand in the exact same spot, and over the decades he had worn down into this like highly polished, nice wood indents for where each one of his toes would go in the exact same spot every day for years. So I know that it can do this. I know that wood can. I know that wood has this property to it, even though it might be a little bit extreme in this case. But I thought it would be nice to include it. So even if it looks like it was something that was carved ergonomically, if you've seen this video, then you know it's because his hand wore it down and sort of compressed it and smoothed it down into it, and then added some carving to not only make it look a bit more folksy and culturally, but it needs to look dwarven. So of course geometric lines, it's just a good iconic look for dwarves, at least for this stuff. Oh yeah, as far as the actual costume that he's got here, largely inspired by the Sami people of Northern Europe. They're just very like when Kyle described it as just being very simple kind of work clothes. I just pictured, my mind immediately went more to these Northern European folks, and just thinking of them working hard, building boats, carving like wood canoes out of logs, herding reindeer, and they just like working around and getting stuff done, and it just made sense to me to sort of go that route. But they've got such a practical quality to their clothes, and they've got they're so I guess folksy, like this traditional dress that I mean they still wear it now in certain groups, but there's sort of like a nice blend between their outfit, it doesn't like fit with medieval stuff, but it doesn't break it. It does have like a peasant look, very practical, very recognizable but distinct. It's kind of like how I describe Russian things, where like with Russia and the West, there's always like something very familiar, like you know what it's for, whether it's a forest or an outfit or architecture or a weapon or a tank or a space ship. You can always tell exactly what it is and what it should be doing, but it just has like this strange twist to it. It's just this weird subtle little difference. It's just this little magical thing. Sometimes it's definitely more obvious than otherwise, but I mean, like even like when I mean like a forest, it's like it's similar to stuff up here, but there's still a different personality to it. Maybe I'm just rambling. I'm not expecting that to make too much sense, so I'll drop it. But they're a good inspiration for just folksy, non-modern or a modern work clothes, and so I went that route. I didn't rip anything too like one-to-one. I mean, his collar is definitely lifted from a lot of their sort of coats and jackets and things, but I mean, you got the chest opening for being able to, it can open up, it can bend, you can, get the airflow going. As far as this bear paw here, so it's bear totem. I guess, considering it's a dwarf, it's not actually that big of a bear's paw. It's sizable. You wouldn't want to fight that bear. But it's not actually that super big, but for a dwarf it's quite big. I figure it's a striking look, just a bear paw. You don't need like fangs or teeth or like a face or something. But I thought that would just be a good striking look for a bear thing, a bear sort of thing to have. It's almost like a kilt. It's kind of even one of those things where, like I've said a million times, like pants look strange on fantasy characters unless you tweak them, like you give them like a lace-up crotch or stripes and stitching and whatever. But if you just see like leotards without, and if they don't have any sort of fabric hanging down out from under a belt, then it just looks weird. So maybe it's just you'll notice in fantasy art that there's always like flowing fabric around the hips and legs and crotch and like under the belt, but it's almost like it's got to be there, you know. Like otherwise, if you just have a character that just has pants, it just looks too modern. So definitely needed to use reference for the bear's paw just to make sure it's right. It's so easy to think you know what something looks like especially when it comes to animal stuff. But even just having the good thing about this is, as a specific example, is the texture on the paw itself, like on the pads. It's the sort of thing that you don't want to go too far with, and it's easy to be intimidated to actually put in that craggly texture, because when you picture it, it's, at least when I did it, I pictured something that was much softer and much smoother. But it's one of the benefit of it is it gives you the confidence to let it go a bit wilder than you'd think. And even just with anything, like sometimes, well, actually most times, reality looks weirder than you think it could, and that's liberating. It's very encouraging to have that sort of stuff there. So, and even if like even just for personal reasons, where if somebody if someone ever had a problem with it and said, you know, that looks gross, that a bear's paw does not look like that, you could say, here's my reference, basically check my work. This is my peer-reviewed texture or color, and you have to deal with it because this is how things go. It's nice to have that backup, but yeah, using reference is good. As far, Quincy, no, don't rub that. Okay, come over here. Okay. Color-wise, I didn't want to go full brown, full green, in like a weird like nature sort of color scheme. You don't need to be like a hippie to really love nature, especially in D&D. It's so easy to sort of overdo it, where it's like, well, I've got leaves and skulls and fringe on me, but it's not, I kind of pictured him being more of like an outdoorsy guy. Like he's a retired stonemason, and he's out and he just really appreciates nature, but he's still who he is. And so with his outfit, I was picturing it more from the tradesman perspective. So it's blue, like a denim blue, and even in my mind, I was taking the deer leather color, even though I could push the deer leather more yellow. But you know, with like Carhartt equipment, it's got that brownishness. It's like deer hide work gloves. It's just like blue and yellow being just very good. I guess construction site tradesy, like masculine color scheme. And I thought it'd be quite fitting for him. And even having this vest and these like sort of pads on it, it's I'm not trying to really emulate a vest or like a hunting vest or like a Carhartt vest, but I did get sort of that basis for it from there in my mind. I was sort of like picturing like when you see the crew of guys working on the road and they've got those reflective vests. It's sort of that kind of shape, and you know, he's gonna wear what he's comfortable with. He's 272 years old, so he's got his style picked out, and so I think he's gonna sort of keep that approach going. And lots of rendering stuff out. This definitely happened because I didn't resolve the hand anatomy enough before going and painting. This is what I've talked about a few times, where when you're working on a piece, if every minute that you spend developing the stage earlier in the process, like say a sketch, so for every minute you work on the sketch, you're saving like 3 to 5 minutes in the inking stage or the coloring stage, because you can just quickly pencil in bones or stick figures or like the shape. Just get it resolved when it's quick and messy and easy, and you'll just have it figured out. But if you don't do that, or if you don't do that early on, then you have to sit here and make 6,000 tiny strokes, hemming and hawing, hoping that it's going to crack soon and look like a hand and look how you need it to look. And just, so don't let what happened to me happen to you. So don't do that. So build it up. It's worth it. Just need to add some extra texture, crinkly stuff. Nothing can ever look too nice in fantasy. Too nice is too modern. Everything's got to have dirt and wrinkles and frayed edges, which is strange because I think if you went back in time to the Middle Ages, it would look like a Ren fair in a lot of ways. Like, people would look exactly like people, and outfits would look a lot cleaner than you would have ever guessed and knew. But I'm not complaining. I love the look of all the worn stuff. That's one of the best things about fantasy. It's just the age and the texture and the life that gets put on everything. So I'm totally okay with that. But I think we'd all be shocked and actually really disappointed by a lot of how with what people would actually look like in the past. So as far as this shield goes, Kyle described it as being a solid wood shield. And so I interpreted that as being, I think correctly what he means is that it's one piece. It's not a bunch of slats like a Viking shield, or all the pieces of all the little boards of wood that look like hardwood flooring all put together. So it's one chunk of wood taken out of the side of a tree, but I wanted it to be blunt and fairly raw and sort of just can do. It's not like a carved ornate thing. It's literally just a slab. It's really practical, kind of like his armor. Like, he's not going out to fight. This isn't him being super armed and amazing and like ready for battle. You know, he's just got something that'll block a sword or an axe, and so it's just this big thick countertop of wood. He can take it. You know, he's strong. He's an old stonemason dwarf. He's gonna be super strong. But the one thing I did to try to help give it some more texture his way, and it's subtle, but it's sort of just what I had in mind, is it's not planed, but it has a texture. I was thinking of like him using his masonry tools to shape it, and so it has all these little like chisel marks and divot marks and dimples. Like, he's used a combination of chisels and hammers to kind of bang this thing into shape. Ooh, excuse me. So that's where the texture comes from. And it's not anything too fancy. You just need something really super practical and down to earth. Borderline ascetic. So yeah, dirt, smudge. A lot gets done when you just blob brown everywhere. That does a lot of the dirty work for you, and that's actually a sweet pun. I will say that was intended, because that was great. But whether you pick any sort of color, like even the blue shirt, I started off with just that sort of background color, and then I put the blue on top of that. But once I put just a wash of brown on it, I started to feel like I had something there. I've mentioned before this feeling of once you've pushed a drawing to a certain point, or a painting, sorry, so you've got all these colors working. Once you've got enough colors active on one image, you can take them and start working with them a lot easier than when you're first piling them on. It's sort of like if you were given an empty living room, it would be hard to go and pick the furniture you wanted, but once you had that living room all furnished, it would be really easy to rearrange things into different ways and see how you like them, and live in it. It's sort of a dumb analogy. I'm getting worse at analogies as I get older, but yeah, brown. Put brown on everything, just really subtly. Put it in corners. Put it where. I mean, if I don't, if it works, like it's sort of yeah, like put it where something it wouldn't just get brushed off. Put it where it would gather and collect and maybe dry. Actually, I would really recommend for everybody is to look up Warhammer painting videos, Warhammer figurines, the tabletop war games. I don't have any, and I don't play it, and I'm not interested. But I've always loved the figures and the art. I've got a soft spot for it. Ever since I was a kid, they're just so over the top and just so unapologetic and so much fun. But there's one guy in particular named Buy Painted, Buy Painted. He does a lot of stuff with airbrush for the most part, but when he goes in, when you just see what you can do with a few colors and a couple techniques, it's very fantastic. It's very excellent stuff. It's sort of like Bob Ross for old nerds like me, even though I'm not old and I'm not that nerdy, I guess. I don't know. If I'm watching Warhammer painting videos on YouTube on a Saturday, yeah, okay. But it's great because you see layering of colors. You see starting with a primer, starting with a base color, and then on top of that base color you're using maybe one or two different colors in the right place, and it becomes by magic a material like rust or metal or dirt or chipped paint, and just with a couple things. And that actually was a big inspiration for my working process with my colors on a single layer, and like minimal trying to use as few main colors as possible, because you can do so much with so little. So look up Buy Painted, Buy Painted, and just watch a few of those. I like the ones where he does like the orc mechs and some tanks, some human tank sort of things, where there's like a lot of metal and stuff. It's very fun, but definitely watch that stuff. You can just to see how much you can do with very few colors, because it really is a lot. That's what I have to say about adding brown. It's good stuff. So you want to. One thing to look out for is trying to always avoid stuff looking too sterile. There's something to be said about clean cut lines and non-wrinkled fabric, but that's more of like a nobility thing. If somebody's going to have like a tunic or a dress or something that doesn't have any wrinkles, it's because they're really loaded and they've got really fancy fabrics and they can pay people to take care of them. But in fantasy stuff, you've always got to draw seams, you've always got to draw wrinkles and stitches and dirt and fraying and just as much texture in life as you can possibly get it. It just has to be there. Otherwise, it looks too modern and cold and like a cheap, like made for like a TV movie. They just raided the costume department or something. It can get really bad. So wherever you can think to put it, think about like how people make things. Watch documentaries or like even just YouTube videos about like medieval life, like sewing and blacksmithing and how they made wool and yarn and just as much stuff as you can about anything fabricated. It comes in handy, and even though you forget a lot, you forget most. I'm always forgetting stuff, and thankfully I get to relearn them or rediscover them or remember them, like I mentioned before. I guess my memory's getting better. But there's so much stuff online for that. But that's important, because not only does it help you paint it looking the right way, but you're also making something that can actually be built, whether it's by 3D modelers, other artists, or cosplayers. If you have something grounded, or at least feasibly grounded, something that is grounded enough that it could be emulated by reality, you're going to be in a much better way. It's just going to have so much more charm and life and personality to it. It's not going to like win you a Pulitzer Prize or anything, but it's those little things that make it interesting. I think it's those little things that make something a character and that make it worth anything. Actually, that reminds me. I was out on a walk the other night with my wife, and we were catching Pokemon, and we passed by this large. It looked like a homemade truck. I don't know what it was. It was this gigantic, like fire truck looking thing. Like it was some weird like desert exploration vehicle made in Germany last year or something, like in the year 2000. Like just this exploration vehicle. It's like neon yellow and had all these pipes or two like hoses on it, like it was sort of like a fire truck thing. Really tall, huge wheels. It was like it looked like something Hot Wheels would come up with almost. But it was cool. But I noticed right on the side, so like there was just a little crushed beer can just right like by the door, and I just stopped and I thought that's character design right there. You just have this whole big truck, this whole big to-do, this whole big shabam wow, and it's cool, but then once you have that, it was just that little tiny perfect accent of personality that was there. Like nobody was driving drunk or anything, but it was like, I mean, the vehicle had enough personality itself, and that's not to be denied. But this little beer can was just like, whoever owns this was out. Like I don't know, like I don't know whether it's accurate, but it told a story in my mind. It was like somebody works on this at home by hand. They love this vehicle. They know a lot about vehicles. They obviously have an adventurous spirit, a hardworking spirit, to be driving to want to have or even have need of this vehicle. Like this person like works, they're putting out forest fires, they're saving lives, but they've got a spirit. They just got it's Friday night, it's Friday evening when we were out. It's probably like from earlier in the day, just like out hot in the day. You just picture this, you can just picture the person with it, just in your mind. Whether it's accurate or not, it gives you that it just blows that spirit into that character. And to me that was fantastic, but it was just from this like $200,000 like emergency vehicle, but it was just that 10-cent beer can that just made the whole thing come together. And to me that was striking. So I might actually the first time anybody mentions the picture and wants me to put it up, I'll put it on Twitter. But I'll only do it once goated. I'll show you guys what the vehicle was. I took a picture, but I thought that was great. So it's those tiny little things, and I don't know, like maybe I'm just projecting. Maybe it's like, maybe just I notice those things. But I think your brain does. I think everybody's brain does, because we all have that stuff. I mean, that was an example from real life, and there's stuff about me. If you looked at me, you could tell a lot about me. You could make a lot of really reasonable assumptions about me, or anybody. Like there's all these, everybody's always got little ticks. Everybody's always got little things that betray who they are and tell you stories. And you don't want to like jump to too many conclusions, but everything's there for a reason. Naked wrists are also one of those things that looks very weird in fantasy. There's no reason for it. It's completely irrational, and I, for one, am okay with fighting that. But yeah, naked wrists. There's got to be bracers. There's got to be leather straps. There's got to be like bangles and jewelry. But in this case, I don't want that anymore. I said enough's enough. And one thing, too, I just wanted to admit, actually, when I was done, I sort of realized there's a couple things on the forum that I want to change, but I won't because it's close enough. But it's even been in the last 4 weeks that I finally feel like I'm starting to understand how to draw forearm muscles. They are a nightmare. They're absolutely horrible to draw. They're very different on people, depending on how built they are in that regard and what they do for a living. In this case, this guy's got basically Popeye arms. They're as big as his biceps. He uses his arms. Actually, a lot of stonemasonry is just done with the wrists rather than with the whole arm or the shoulder. But yeah, there's so many elegant curves and overlapping things and variety. Not too much variety, mind you, but there is variety. But yeah, forearms. I've been so intimidated by them for so long, but I figured I'd just share that. There's always stuff that I'm forgetting, that I'm relearning, that I never really learned too well to get to from the get-go. Like as another example, like it wasn't even until the last maybe 6 months ago, or even like 7 or 8 months ago, but even like facial muscles, like I'd gone over them in school or in college and even before that on my own time, but I hadn't committed it too well to memory, and I sort of just decided I was just going to wing it, and I just in my mind I had it built up as something it's too complex to learn. I know enough already, and I'm afraid of getting it like forgetting it and overloading myself. But a few months ago, I started drawing facial muscles and just studying the structure of the face, looking at people's faces for the structures underneath and recognizable landmarks. And it was a game changer. It totally changed the way that I draw faces and think about drawing faces and expressions. I think the expressions I draw nowadays are so much better because of that. But that's a thing, and even for someone like me, there's so much stuff that I'm mysterious about. So that's the dagger that he's got down on the side. It lets him talk to animals once a day. So I wanted something very subdued, it's not like blazing with power and might. It's just a trinket. It's a little totem. It's something crafted with love and significance and care. And it's got a wolf howling on the end. Just like a symbol of animals talking, communicating. So that's what that is. I'm playing with wispy hair. The wispy Nordic hair. Unkempt, but not disgusting. Thin, but not bald. He's kind of bald. It's pretty bald, but more in an old man sort of way, I think. The hair just going to get thinner. It's just going to happen. I'm sorry. Sorry, bro. His face was very fun to draw. I think it's got the most personality out of all of my drawings in my life so far. So it was cool. But it's a good character. I know he's a dwarf, and I love dwarves, and I've got a soft spot for dwarves. But even I've been planning on building a character lately and starting a new one, but who also is like an elderly dwarf who was a tradesman who is now adventuring. Maybe it was a little part of this. Maybe I just wanted to, dip my toe a little bit, but I don't know, give it a lot more heart and soul. I don't know. I think dwarves don't get enough love. I don't think they get enough respect. But that's just me. And then as far as the magic telepathy necklace, I just wanted something simple. I think with enchanted items, you don't want everything looking like it should be held by a king. It shouldn't be too crazy. Oh, and the moccasins. I forgot to mention the moccasins. Just really comfortable, good for forests. Okay, so a lot more I could have said, but yeah, just with that. I guess that's enough for the feet. So anyway, this is the Durul, the dwarven druid for Kyle. This is for the free weekly fantasy RPG pen and paper D&D character art lottery every Monday on Twitter at R&D Fantasy. I let you know what hashtag to tweet every Monday, and then if you win, then I draw your characters free of charge, just like this. You just send me the description, and I just do it up for you. So, anyway, hopefully we'll be able to get a few more dwarf weeks in the future. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Hope it helped.